Today we'll talk about webinar series, meaning hosting not just one webinar, but multiple around the same theme. We'll also take a look at 5 successful examples of companies hosting webinar series and maximizing their conversion doing so. Let's get into it. And 3 tips to really smash your next webinar series out of the park is to, first of all, set a consistent schedule, meaning host your webinar at the same day and time every week or month or whatever your cadence is. For example, like Agda PS that hosts their webinars on Univid. They have a set theme around Friday webinars and they host them the same time for the same length, about 20 minutes or so, every Friday. This kind of sets a good pace and you will set expectations with the attendees. They know what to expect, they can clear their schedule ahead of time, and they build a habit out of attending the webinar. It also becomes easy for them to tell others about your webinar at the same time when it typically takes place. So this is really effective to build relationships over time and grow a big audience. Also, as we have seen in the Univid Webinar Insights report, we have a few days and times that are better than others to typically host. For example, at 3 p.m. in the afternoon have shown to be really popular and increase attendance rate a bit if you look overall. You can learn more about the Univid Webinar Insights report below. I'll drop a link there to find out what day and time to host your webinar and webinar series on. The second tip is to always have your next webinar ready. So for webinar series works so well because you get and build a momentum. For example, like SaaS company Kundo did, growing their webinar series or audience with over 4.5x. After switching to Univid for running their webinar series. And that was also because they built a webinar series that kind of reoccurred with a certain frequency, and then the audience really kind of built throughout that period. And yeah, pretty cool stuff. But does that mean we need to kind of plan all the webinars out ahead? Well, no. So I typically said that planning out all the webinars ahead can get you kind of stuck analysis paralysis or like planning mode. Instead, make sure to always have the next webinar planned. Meaning ideally with a date, time and the registration page. So you have a link to kind of drop in the live webinar. So this way you can actually smoothly drive signups for your next webinar during current webinar. And that's really efficient, which moves us into the final tip. So the third tip is to kind of push for signups using a live webinar CTA. So using a live webinar CTA to drive signups or next steps from a webinar have been really popular and have increased conversions with up to 50% to a next step. Whether it's downloading an ebook, signing up for a newsletter, or like booking a demo, or signing up to the next webinar in a series. So essentially just activate your call to action in the live webinar where you have text that says sign up to your next webinar, and you can link to that registration page that you already set up, and you can add a one-liner about what you will talk about. And attendees that like the value of the first webinar will be happy to sign up, and this way you can build out the audience size with a bunch of registrants that are already interested and committed. And that's the kind of one-on-one on getting webinar series right. Let's now look at a few real-life examples, more specifically 5 of them, of hosts that understood the value of webinar series and essentially how they build momentum and drive leads and awareness using a series of webinars. Let's get into the first one. The first one is B2B SaaS company Kundo. As I mentioned, they grew their webinar series with 450%. That's pretty crazy. Well, they know what's up, and after they grew their webinar series to about 600 registrants per webinar and now beyond. And they use the kind of platform to their advantage in this case, engaging the audience a lot using live reactions, polls and Q&A. For example, with the live reactions, they could easily get instant feedback like, are you hearing us? Do you agree with this topic or take on this? And then you could get a really kind of engaging format as you are executing your live webinar. And a few things Kundo have done really well is that they've brought on internal experts or like topic experts, so both internal ones and external ones. So when they talk about topics like AI and customer service and similar, they really have experts that can share their views and share with, for example, real life examples, takes, and kind of walkthrough of studies and how they've done stuff in practice. And that really have become a popular content and format. Also, they use their own webinar studio to make things look professional, so that's always nice, and have their kind of good lighting and it all branded together with the branded session, of course, in the webinar platform, and in this case Univid. It also helps them focus on like not the technical stuff, but just delivering a good webinar and bringing up engagement. And that is the kind of final piece they've done really well, that they follow up on the Q&A really well. So they have a continuous Q&A throughout the webinar, not just at the end, and they make sure to bring up questions to the presenter that they can answer live in the video, but they also answer very like qualitatively with text for each of the questions, and really make sure to answer everyone. So they make people seen, and that is very popular to get more questions and also build on the kind of topics for the upcoming webinars. So those are some things they do really well. Jumping into the next one. The next one is the HR company or SaaS company Heartpace. What they've done really well is that they have used a nice overview of all their webinars in a series. So essentially they divide up and have one overview per series, and then they can easily have people go there, watch previous webinars, but also upcoming ones, and kind of consume a lot of the content if it's available on demand after. So providing a good overview is important, and having attendees navigate between the webinars too, so it's not just attending a single webinar. And encouraging that through a nice overview is something they've done really well. And they've used the kind of spaces functionality in Univid as a way to do this. The third one is Letterlife, an app or B2C company that have built a series of community webinars and focused on B2C. They essentially leveraged a webinar series to build their community of now over 20,000 women, and have grown their user base with over 400% during a few months only, using partly webinars as a part in that strategy. Here's an example of how it looked before going live and then when they are live. So they've been using the kind of live reactions a lot, together with CTA buttons on the bottom, so you can drive next steps towards the upcoming webinars or resources related to their app or what they talked about that session. So I guess takeaway here is that they used webinars to grow a community and build a relationship with more and more audience members that could expect good content and be able to also chat with each other. So for example, activating the chat where people can chat a bit between each other, not just ask questions such in the Q&A, but also have a very professional setup with this like a nice countdown before going live, and in this case also using a studio and shared screen, and then a call to action to download resources or take the next step and like sign up for the next webinar. And they've also mixed existing community members with new ones, which can be really powerful if you're actually growing a community or around your product. Automation is also really key, especially when you host multiple webinars, which you would do in a series of webinars. That brings us into the fourth example, which is the SaaS company In Exchange. They help their customers in turn automate their invoicing, and they've also been using a lot of the automation around that is available in the Univid webinar platform. For example, connecting it to HubSpot, making sure that they can nurture both new prospects and existing customers in a good way and communicate with them while keeping everything in sync with their webinars that are occurring on a weekly or monthly basis, and typically around new product releases, hands-on product tutorials, but also around generally like making your business more efficient and automating. So I think that's pretty cool how you can both bring in very hands-on product related webinars and combine them with more like broad thought leadership webinars, and also automate it all with a good HubSpot connection in this case. And driving next steps from your webinars is really important, and someone who understood this is specialist consultant company Pector, our fifth example, and that is about using CTAs to sign up to the next webinars in the series. We briefly touched upon this, that you can use live CTAs to drive next steps, and that could be signups for the upcoming webinars. So essentially by combining both live reactions, Q&A, chat, and so on, Pictor have also added CTA buttons to drive next steps and also for actually signing up to the next webinar. So I think this is a pretty cool hands-on example of someone doing this, and driving next steps could be also obviously to your offered services in some cases, but you could also add this kind of sign up to the next webinar and make sure you get growing audience and high attendance rate throughout. So using CTA buttons can be a really good way to build that momentum, get a lot of signups, build your audience, and increase the number of registrants in your kind of pool of the series. So hosting webinar series can be a great way to gain momentum, build that audience, and convert new customers, and keep attendees engaged until they are ready to convert. Now you have a few tips on how you can host a webinar series that convert, but also 5 real-life examples of webinar series that have done really well. If you are planning out your next webinar or webinar series ahead, Univid is a platform to create engaging webinars in 60 seconds. Feel free to test it out, I'll drop a link down below. Also, we put together a webinar software guide, so I would recommend to check that out as well, whichever platform you want to go for with your next webinar or you are using today. So feel free to check out our channel, we put out a bunch of good content just like this around webinars, video and live, and how you can get more out of your existing marketing efforts. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.